New York, the city of dreams, ambitions, and contradictions. It was a city where power, wealth, and status determined your place in the world. Among its glittering skyscrapers, in one of the tallest towers, sat Nathaniel Nate Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood Enterprises, a name synonymous with power and influence in the corporate world. At 35, Nate had everything one could ever dream of: a multi-billion-dollar empire, luxury beyond imagination, and the admiration of everyone around him. Yet, despite all his success, there was something missing, a void that no amount of money or recognition could fill. The expectations placed upon him by his family, particularly his father, were suffocating. The Blackwood legacy demanded perfection, and Nate had learned to live up to it, even if it meant losing himself in the process. His family had carefully crafted his future where he would marry someone from the same social circle, continue the family business, and keep the Blackwood name at the pinnacle of New York's elite. But there was only one thing missing from the carefully constructed life his family had laid out for him. Love. Olivia Turner was a world apart from the high society circles that Nate had known all his life. At 28, she had carved her own path in New York, born into a modest family in Brooklyn. Olivia had worked her way up from a humble assistant position in a small design firm to becoming the lead creative director at one of the fastest-growing marketing companies in the city. She had no interest in luxury or fame. Her only ambition was to create a life that mattered on her own terms. Olivia was beautiful, not in the conventional way that society expected, but in a raw, natural sense. Her beauty came from her confidence, her intelligence, and her unapologetic nature. Her dark, chestnut hair and warm brown eyes were striking. But it was her smile, genuine and full of life, that left the deepest impression. She had no idea what she was doing at tonight's gala. The event was hosted by one of New York's most powerful families, the Lockwoods, who were well known for their political connections and immense wealth. Olivia had been invited by one of her clients, but she didn't belong here, this world of lavish parties and powerful figures. Still, her presence was requested, and she had accepted the invitation out of politeness. The moment she stepped into the grand ballroom, the glittering chandeliers, the extravagant gowns, and the polished faces of New York's elite overwhelmed her. Olivia felt like an outsider, a mere spectator in a world she didn't belong to. She couldn't help but feel out of place, her simple black dress nothing compared to the haute couture surrounding her. As Olivia stood by the refreshments table, feeling out of place, her eyes briefly locked with someone across the room. For a moment, the world seemed to fade away. There, standing near a large pillar with a drink in hand, was none other than Nathaniel Blackwood. His tall frame, commanding presence, and the way he effortlessly commanded attention caught her off guard. She quickly turned her gaze away, but the connection lingered in the air. It wasn't the first time she had seen him in the media. He was a fixture in New York's business world, and everyone knew his name. But seeing him in person was different. There was something about his gaze, intense, yet distant, that drew her in. Nate, on the other hand, was immediately struck by her. Olivia had an aura about her, something authentic and grounded that contrasted sharply with the polished, often artificial interactions he was used to in his world. She was confident, but not in the way people usually flaunted their status. It was an effortless kind of confidence, one that didn't rely on wealth or reputation. He watched her for a few moments, unsure of what it was, but something about her intrigued him. The way she carried herself, self-assured but not pretentious, was different from the women he had been introduced to. His curiosity piqued. He took a step toward her. "Excuse me." Nate's voice was smooth, but there was a note of genuine interest in his tone as he approached Olivia, who was now looking out the large windows of the ballroom. "I don't believe we've met." Olivia turned, a little surprised but composed. "No, I don't think we have," she said with a polite smile, trying to keep her nerves at bay. Her heart was beating a little faster than usual. "I'm Nathaniel Blackwood," he introduced himself, extending a hand. "I know this world can be a bit overwhelming sometimes. You don't look like you're here for the usual reasons." Olivia raised an eyebrow, a playful smile tugging at her lips. "And what are the usual reasons, Mr. Blackwood?" Nate chuckled lightly, appreciating her quick wit. "Well, most people come to these events looking for something: business deals, networking, connections. But I get the feeling you're not here for that." Olivia considered his words carefully. "You're right. I'm just here because I was invited by a client, but I have no intention of getting lost in the glitter and gold." She smiled, her tone warm but unapologetically honest. There was something refreshing about her. She wasn't like the others at the gala who seemed to be playing a role. She didn't care about impressing him or anyone else in the room. She was just herself. "I can respect that," Nate said, his eyes softening. "It's rare to find someone who isn't looking for something in a room full of people who are. May I ask what you are looking for?" Olivia looked at him, and for a split second their gazes held. She hesitated before answering, realizing that the question wasn't just about this party. "I guess I'm looking for honesty. A place where I can be true to myself, without worrying about what everyone else thinks." Their conversation flowed naturally after that. They talked about their lives, Olivia's journey from a small-town girl to a rising star in New York's business world, and Nate's struggles with his family's expectations. It was refreshing for Olivia to speak so openly with someone who, despite his wealth and status, seemed more like a real person than a figurehead. By the time the evening came to a close, Nate and Olivia had exchanged numbers, and they both knew that something had shifted between them. For Olivia, it was the first time in a long time that she felt truly seen for who she was, not just as someone to be admired for her looks or status. And for Nate, it was the first time he had met someone who didn't care about his wealth or his name. Someone who made him feel like he was more than just a business machine. As they said their goodbyes that night, Nate couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement, something he hadn't felt in a long time. And Olivia, despite her reluctance to get involved in the world of power and prestige, found herself intrigued by the man she had just met. But both of them knew this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be complicated, filled with obstacles neither of them had anticipated. They came from two different worlds, and the chances of something real between them seemed improbable. But for now, they couldn't ignore the spark that had ignited between them. The days following the gala passed in a blur for both Nathaniel and Olivia. They had exchanged messages, and Nate had made it clear that he wanted to see her again. But there was a lingering unease in the air. Both knew that their worlds were drastically different, and the relationship they were starting to form would not be without its complications. As the weeks went by, Olivia found herself thinking about Nate more and more. Their conversations had been easy, and there was an undeniable connection between them. Nate wasn't like the other men in her life, men who only saw her for her looks or her potential to move up the corporate ladder. Nate saw her as someone with depth, someone he could talk to about real things. But Olivia's excitement was tempered with caution. She had always prided herself on being independent, and she had no interest in becoming a trophy wife or living a life dictated by someone else's expectations. Her family had always supported her, but she had grown used to their subtle disappointment that she wasn't married to someone more suitable. Her mother had often hinted that a man like Nate would be a perfect match for her, a man with money, power, and influence. But Olivia didn't want to be just another piece of the puzzle in Nate's carefully constructed world. One afternoon, as she sat in her office working on an upcoming project, Olivia received a message from Nate. "Nate, I know this might sound sudden, but would you like to have dinner with me this weekend? No expectations, just dinner." Olivia smiled at the simplicity of his message. There was something refreshing about his straightforwardness. She quickly typed a response. "Olivia, I'd love that. Saturday works." She hit send, but immediately felt a flutter in her chest. This wasn't just any dinner. This was the beginning of something potentially real. But even as she smiled at her phone, she couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in the back of her mind. Could she really live in this world? Was she ready to enter the high society life that Nate led, where everything was under constant scrutiny? Meanwhile, Nate was also wrestling with his own feelings. He had never met someone like Olivia. She was beautiful, yes, but it was her intelligence, her sense of humor, and her complete disregard for the world he inhabited that made him feel alive. She didn't care about his wealth, his family legacy, or his status. She saw him for who he was, a man who had been raised to lead, but who was now questioning whether that path was truly his own. The more time he spent with Olivia, the more he felt torn. His family had expectations. They had built Blackwood Enterprises from the ground up, and Nate was expected to continue the legacy, to keep the family name at the top. But as he spent more time with Olivia, he realized that the life he had been living was based on his father's expectations. One that kept him trapped in a gilded cage wasn't enough anymore. At a family gathering, his mother, dressed in her usual elegant manner, had cornered him about Olivia. "So, Nathaniel," she said, her voice smooth but pointed, "I heard you've been spending quite a bit of time with Olivia Turner. You know, darling, she's not from a family like ours. Her background is, well, let's just say it's not exactly what we're used to." Nate's jaw clenched, but he kept his composure. "I'm aware, Mom, she's different, but that doesn't mean she's not right for me." His mother's eyes narrowed. "You need to think carefully. You're not just dating for yourself, you're representing this family, our legacy. We can't afford to mix with people who don't have the same ... standards." Nate looked away, feeling the weight of his family's expectations pressing on him. "I'm not living for this family anymore," he muttered under his breath, but just loud enough for his mother to hear. Saturday evening arrived, and Nate was anxiously waiting outside the restaurant, watching as Olivia approached. She looked stunning in a simple yet elegant dress, nothing extravagant, but perfect in its understated beauty. Her smile when she saw him made his heart race. "Hi," she said, her voice soft but warm. "Hi," Nate replied, feeling a rush of emotion. It was incredible how easily she made him feel comfortable. They entered the restaurant together, and as they sat down, their conversation flowed easily. They talked about everything: books, travel, their childhoods, and the connection between them deepened. But as the night wore on, Nate began to sense that something was off. Olivia seemed distracted, her eyes drifting as if she was searching for something. Finally, after a long pause, she looked at him seriously. "Nate, I need to ask you something," she said, her voice steady but filled with concern. "I like you, I really do, but I can't help but wonder ... why me? Why are you even interested in someone like me? Nate felt a pang in his chest. He had been waiting for this moment, knowing that eventually Olivia would question his intentions. He leaned in, his voice quiet but sincere. Because you're not like anyone I've ever met. You don't care about my name, my wealth, or my legacy. You're real, and that's what I've been looking for. I don't want to be with someone who sees me for what I can provide. I want someone who sees me for who I really am. Olivia's eyes softened, but there was still uncertainty in her gaze. But what happens when reality hits, Nate? What happens when your family expects you to marry someone from their world, and I'm not part of that world? Nate reached across the table and took her hand. We'll face that together. But I can't promise you that it'll be easy. I can't promise that my family will accept it. But I can promise that I want to try. For us, as the night came to a close, Nate walked Olivia to her car, both of them quiet for a moment. The world they lived in was so different, and the future was uncertain. Olivia was right, there were forces beyond their control that could tear them apart. But for the first time, Nate didn't feel alone. And for the first time, Olivia allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, their love could overcome the obstacles in front of them. You don't have to make a decision right now, Nate said softly, his voice filled with hope. But whatever happens, I'm in this with you. Olivia looked at him, her heart torn between the life she had built for herself and the life she could have with him. I don't know if I can live in your world, Nate, she said quietly, but I'm willing to try. If you're really ready for it. Nate smiled, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. I'm ready. The days following their dinner were filled with a strange sense of hope mixed with the reality of the challenges that lay ahead. Both Nate and Olivia were unsure about what the future held, but they knew one thing for certain. The love they shared was real, and that made everything feel possible, even if the road ahead was full of obstacles. Nate's decision to step away from his family's expectations was not as simple as just choosing Olivia. It meant cutting ties with everything he had ever known, his father's empire, the life that had been planned for him since birth. The weight of his decision became more apparent with each passing day. His mother had always been the one who subtly controlled the course of his life. She was calculating, always maneuvering behind the scenes to ensure the Blackwood name remained at the top. The evening after their dinner, she invited Nate to their family estate for a conversation. Nate knew what was coming, but he couldn't bring himself to avoid it as he entered the grand living room of their mansion. His mother was already sitting by the fireplace, her posture perfect as always. Her sharp eyes regarded him with a mixture of disappointment and concern. You're making a terrible mistake, Nate, she said, her voice laced with calm authority. I understand that you're infatuated with this, Olivia, but you have to think about the bigger picture. Your father and I didn't work our whole lives to build this legacy just for you to throw it away. Nate's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice steady. I haven't thrown anything away, Mom. I'm just choosing a different future. I don't want to live in your shadow anymore. His mother's eyes darkened. This isn't just about you, Nathaniel. This is about our family's future, about our name. Olivia is a beautiful girl, yes, but she doesn't belong in our world. She's not ... suitable. Do you really want to throw away everything for someone like her? I'm not throwing anything away, Nate replied firmly, his gaze unwavering. I'm choosing myself. His mother sighed, standing up to face him. I see. Well, if you choose Olivia, then you choose to step away from this family, from everything we've built. You'll lose it all, Nathaniel, and you'll regret it." The words hung in the air, heavy with finality. Nate didn't say anything more. He turned and left, his heart aching. His mother's words were a sharp reminder of what he stood to lose. But he couldn't go back. He had made his choice. Meanwhile, Olivia was facing her own battle. The more she spent time with Nate, the more she realized just how different their worlds were. Nate's family was a constant presence in their lives, even when they weren't physically there, and the pressure was starting to weigh on her. One afternoon, Olivia met with her mother for coffee. Her mother had always been supportive of her ambitions, but the moment Olivia mentioned Nate's name, the conversation shifted. "You're still seeing that Blackwood boy, aren't you?" her mother asked, her tone soft but probing. "Yes, Mum, I am," Olivia said, feeling a knot form in her stomach. She knew where this was going. Her mother looked at her, concern etched on her face. "Olivia, darling, you're an intelligent woman. You know as well as I do that his family is not the right fit for you. What are you getting yourself into? This kind of life? It's not for someone like you." Olivia stared down at her coffee cup, her mind racing. "I don't want that life, Mum. I don't want to be a part of his family's world. I just want to be with him." Her mother shook her head gently. "I know you want to be with him, but you have to think about the future. You're not the type of woman he needs. You're not from the right background, and you don't belong in the world he's destined to inherit. You'll just end up hurt." Olivia's heart sank, the weight of her mother's words sinking deep into her chest. She had spent so much time building her own identity, fighting against the odds to create a future on her own terms. And now she felt like everything was slipping through her fingers. As the pressure from both sides grew, Nate and Olivia began to feel the strain in their relationship. They hadn't fought. There was no anger between them, but there was a sense of distance, a growing chasm that neither of them knew how to bridge. Olivia started pulling back, unsure if she was truly capable of living in Nate's world. She loved him, but could she handle the weight of his family's legacy, the constant judgment and expectations? Could she be happy with someone who had so much to lose? One evening, as they sat in Nate's apartment, a silence fell between them. Olivia could feel the tension, the unsaid words hanging between them. "I don't know if I can do this, Nate," Olivia said softly, breaking the silence. "I don't know if I can live in your world. I love you, but everything is so complicated. I'm not sure I can be the person you need." Nate looked at her, his face pained. "I don't want you to change for me, Olivia. I don't want you to give up everything you've worked for. But I can't go back either. I've chosen you. I've chosen this life. I don't want to lose you." Olivia stood up, pacing the room. "You say that now, but what happens when your family pushes back again? What happens when they expect you to fall in line? You'll be torn between me and your family. And I can't keep fighting that battle, Nate." Nate followed her, his voice pleading. "I'm done fighting for everyone else, Olivia. I've spent too much of my life doing what other people want. This why what I want." Olivia turned to face him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "But what if I'm not enough? What if the pressure is too much for us?" Nate stepped closer, his hands reaching for hers. "I don't care what happens, Olivia. I want to be with you, no matter what." It had been days since Olivia had pulled away, and Nate couldn't stop replaying their last conversation in his mind. He had promised her he would choose her, but now, with the weight of his family's legacy pressing down on him, he couldn't help but feel the tug of his past. His father's voice echoed in his ears, warning him that if he didn't fall in line, everything he had worked for would be lost. But what good was it all if he couldn't live the life he truly wanted? Nate hadn't slept in days. The pressure from his family, the looming expectations, and his love for Olivia had created a storm inside him that was beginning to feel impossible to weather. Every time he looked at his phone, he saw messages from his father, messages full of concern, but also of threat. His father wanted him to attend the next shareholders' meeting, to sign the papers for the next big merger, to continue to build the family legacy. Nate knew what that meant. Another step further into a life he didn't want, and another step away from the woman he loved. Olivia, on the other hand, was torn between the desire to stay true to herself and the love she felt for Nate. The more she saw of his world, the more she began to doubt her place in it. His family's expectations, the constant pressure, the never-ending scrutiny. She didn't know if she could live in a world where her every move would be judged, her every decision questioned. She had built a life for herself, one that was independent and free from the weight of family expectations. She had worked hard to get to where she was, and while she wanted to be with Nate, she didn't want to lose herself in the process. She couldn't become just another piece in his family's perfect puzzle. She wasn't sure if she could handle being in his world. No matter how much she loved him, one evening, as she was walking home after another long day at work, Olivia's phone buzzed. It was a message from Nate. "Nate, can we meet tomorrow? I need to talk." Her heart skipped a beat. The longing she had felt for him, the ache of missing him, was suddenly overwhelming. She missed him terribly, but part of her still felt like they were too different. She wasn't sure if she could handle the emotional toll this relationship was taking on her the next day. Olivia agreed to meet Nate at a quiet cafe, a place that had once been their escape from the chaos of their worlds. She sat at a corner table, her hands nervously twisting the napkin as she waited for him to arrive. When Nate walked in, he looked different. His usual confidence was gone, replaced by a weight of uncertainty that mirrored her own. He walked over to her and sat down, his eyes locked on hers. There was a tension in the air that neither of them could ignore. "Olivia," Nate began, his voice strained, "I don't know what to say anymore. I've been torn between two worlds, and I can't keep pretending like it doesn't hurt. I love you, but I don't know how to make this work with everything else in my life pulling me in different directions." Olivia's heart ached. She could see the pain in his eyes, the same pain she felt every day. But she had to be honest with him. "Then maybe we need to take a step back," she said softly. "I love you, Nate, but I don't want to lose myself in your world. I need to know who I am outside of you, outside of us. I don't know if I can live a life where I'm constantly battling with your family, with your company." Nate looked at her, the weight of her words hitting him hard. "I don't want to lose you, but I don't want to lose myself either. And right now, I don't know who I am without you, without my family, without the company. I feel like I'm falling apart." The silence between them stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Finally, Olivia broke the silence, her voice barely above a whisper. "Nate, I don't want to be the one to hold you back. But I also don't want to be part of a life that's not truly yours. You need to choose. Either you stay in this world, with all the pressures and expectations, or you come with me, and we build a life where love and happiness come first. I can't be in the middle of this tug-of-war anymore. I need you to make a choice." Nate sat there, staring at her, his mind racing. The words she had spoken echoed in his head, and for the first time, he realized the truth. He had been living for everyone else but himself. He had been caught in the web of his family's expectations, the corporate world's demands, and the fear of letting it all go. But now, the woman he loved was asking him to make a choice between the life he had known and the life he wanted. "I love you, Olivia," Nate said, his voice thick with emotion. "And I want to build a life with you. But I don't know if I can leave everything behind. My family won't understand. They'll never accept it." "You have to choose, Nate," Olivia said gently, her eyes filled with tears. "Either you keep living for them, or you live for us." As the days passed, both Nate and Olivia found themselves facing the breaking point. For Olivia, it was a test of her own identity. She had always prided herself on being independent, but now she wasn't sure if her relationship with Nate was worth losing herself for. For Nate, it was a test of courage, a test to see if he could truly choose love over legacy, happiness over duty. One night, after hours of restless thinking, Nate made his decision. He walked into the apartment where Olivia was waiting, her expression uncertain. He took a deep breath, then spoke the words that would change everything. "I choose you, Olivia. I choose us. No more pretending, no more living for other people. I want to be with you. Whatever happens, we'll face it together." Olivia's heart skipped a beat as she heard the sincerity in his voice. She looked at him, tears welling up in her eyes. "Are you sure? Are you really ready for this?" Nate nodded, his gaze unwavering. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." And with that, they both knew that their journey was only just beginning. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but at least they would face it together. The days after Nate's declaration to choose Olivia over everything else were filled with a sense of hope, but also unease. He had made the decision to step away from his family's expectations, to fight for a life with Olivia, but the weight of his choice was heavier than he had anticipated. Nate had always been the pillar of the Blackwood family. From the moment he was born, he had been groomed to take over the business, uphold the legacy, and continue the empire. But now, after years of following a path laid out for him by his parents, he was stepping away. The family didn't take kindly to the news. The first confrontation came just days after he made his choice. His father, cold and unyielding as ever, called him into his office. "I've heard enough." "Nate," his father's voice boomed as he stood by the window of his office, overlooking the city below. "You've made a fool of yourself. You're going to throw away everything we've worked for. For her." Nate stood firm, his back straight, his eyes locked with his father's. "I'm not throwing anything away, Dad. I'm choosing my own path. A path that doesn't revolve around family expectations and the corporate world. I want something more than what you've given me. You're not just choosing yourself," his father said with a mocking laugh. "You're choosing a life of mediocrity. You're choosing to throw away your place in history, all for some girl who has nothing to offer. You'll regret this. I promise you that." Nate's jaw clenched. "I won't regret it. Not for a second. I'm done living for you, for the company. I've chosen my future, and it's not this." His father's expression hardened. "If you leave, you'll have nothing. No Blackwood Enterprises, no legacy, just a simple life, empty and pointless." "I've made my choice," Nate said, quietly but firmly. "I'm choosing Olivia, and I'm choosing a life that's mine." While Nate was fighting his family, Olivia was fighting her own battles. Despite everything Nate had promised, she couldn't shake the doubt that had crept into her mind. She had always been independent, built her own career, and fought her way to the top. But now she was faced with the reality of joining Nate in his world. And it wasn't as simple as she had imagined. One evening, she sat in the small apartment she had made her own, staring out the window, feeling the weight of her decisions. She loved Nate more than anything, but as their relationship grew, so did her fear of losing herself. She had spent her entire life proving her worth, pushing herself to be more than just a pretty face. Could she really leave her life behind for someone else's world? Her phone buzzed, and she glanced at the message. It was from her mother. "Mum, Olivia, I heard about Nate's decision. Are you really going to let him drag you into that world? You've worked so hard to get where you are. Don't lose yourself." Olivia felt a pang in her chest. Her mother's words echoed her deepest fears. Would she lose herself in Nate's world? Would she be swallowed up by the very things she had spent so long fighting against? She didn't want to be just another woman by Nate's side, another accessory to his empire. She wanted to be her own person, someone who had a future independent of anyone else's expectations. But as she stared at her phone, she couldn't ignore the love she felt for him. Could she really walk away from this? Could she turn her back on a man who had shown her what real love felt like? As days passed, the tension between Nate and Olivia grew. Nate was facing the fallout from his family and the business, while Olivia was struggling with the idea of giving up her own independence for love. Their conversations became more strained, each of them feeling the pressure of the choices they had made. One evening, as they sat in the living room of Nate's apartment, the weight of their decisions hung between them. "Olivia," Nate began, his voice heavy with emotion, "I know this isn't easy. I know my world is nothing like yours. But I love you, and I want to build a future with you. We can make it work, I promise." Olivia's heart ached as she looked at him. "I want to be with you, Nate. I do. But I don't know if I can give up everything I've worked for. I've spent so long building my own life, and now you want me to step into your world. I don't know if I can do that." Nate reached for her hand, his touch gentle but firm. "You don't have to give up everything, Olivia. I'm not asking you to change who you are. I just want to be with you. I want us to build a future together, one where we support each other, no matter what." Olivia pulled her hand away, her eyes filled with tears. "But what if I lose myself in your world, Nate? What if I lose everything that's made me who I am?" Nate's heart broke at the sight of her pain. He knew this wasn't easy for her, but he had never wanted her to feel like she had to change for him. "You won't lose yourself. I won't let that happen. But we have to face the truth. We can't keep living in the shadows of our pasts. We have to decide if we're willing to fight for this. Fight for us." Olivia looked at him, her heart torn. She had always been independent, and the thought of losing that was terrifying. But Nate's words were true. Love wasn't just about being together. It was about making sacrifices and fighting for what mattered most. The next few days were filled with tension and silence. Both of them were exhausted from the emotional toll of their decisions, and they knew they had to make a choice. But the weight of their family's expectations, their careers, and the life they had built was overwhelming. One night, as Nate lay awake in bed, his mind racing with thoughts of Olivia and the future, he made a decision. He had spent too much time letting others dictate his life. He had let his family's legacy and the weight of his company control his every move. But now it was time to take control of his own destiny. The next morning, he walked into his father's office, ready to face the consequences of his decision. The day after his confrontation with his father, Nate woke up feeling like a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. He had made the decision, he had chosen Olivia, and he was prepared to stand by her, no matter what. But he also knew that the road ahead would not be easy. His family was not going to let him walk away from everything without a fight. His father's words still echoed in his mind. But for the first time in years, Nate felt like he was making a decision that was his own. He was ready to fight for the life he wanted, the life with Olivia. But as he sat at his desk, looking at the paperwork in front of him, the contracts, the company mergers, the legacy of his family, he knew he had to leave it all behind. Picking up his phone, he dialed the number he had been avoiding. His father answered on the first ring. "Did you come to your senses, Nate?" His father's voice was cold, filled with disdain. "No," Nate replied firmly, his heart racing. "I'm not coming back. I've made my choice. I'm leaving the company. I'm done with all of it." There was silence on the other end of the line. Nate could feel the tension in the air, the finality of his words hanging heavy. "You're making a mistake, son," his father said, his voice tight with anger. "You'll regret this. You can't just walk away from everything we've built. You're throwing away your future, your legacy, everything." "I'm not throwing anything away," Nate said, his voice steady. "I'm choosing a future with Olivia. That's what I want. And I'm ready to face whatever comes next." His father's voice grew quieter, but the bitterness was still there. "Then you've chosen to walk away from your family, from this company, from everything you've ever known. Don't come crawling back when it all falls apart." "I won't," Nate said firmly, hanging up the phone before his father could say another word. He stood up from his desk, looking out at the city skyline. This was it. There was no turning back now. Meanwhile, Olivia was struggling with her own doubts. While she had always been independent, strong, and driven by her own ambitions, the weight of the life Nate was choosing to leave behind for her wasn't lost on her. She had never wanted to be a burden to him. The thought of him sacrificing everything for her, for their love, filled her with both pride and guilt. She was sitting in her apartment, staring at the phone in her hand. Nate had called earlier to let her know about his decision, about walking away from the family business. She knew how hard that must have been for him. He had always been groomed to take over, to lead the Blackwood legacy, and now he was throwing it all away. For her, but did she deserve that kind of sacrifice? Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was a message from her mother, one she had been avoiding for weeks. "Mum, Olivia, we need to talk. This is getting serious. You need to think about the future. You can't throw away everything you've worked for. Don't let him drag you into that world. You have a future, and it's not with him." Olivia sighed and put the phone down. She had heard the same thing from her mother time and time again. But this time, she wasn't sure if she agreed. The path ahead was unclear. But one thing was certain, she loved Nate. And if he was willing to leave everything behind for her, shouldn't she be willing to do the same for him? That evening, Nate met Olivia at a quiet restaurant, a place where they had shared many meaningful conversations. The air between them was thick with unspoken words. Nate knew Olivia was still grappling with the weight of his decision. He needed to reassure her that this was what he wanted, but he also feared that his choice might tear them apart. "I've made my decision," Olivia, Nate said softly as he sat down across from her, his eyes searching hers. I'm done with my family's business. I'm done living in their shadow. I'm ready to make a life with you, one where we both get to choose what comes next. Olivia looked at him, her heart heavy with emotion. She loved him, she really did, but the reality of his decision was sinking in. You've given up everything for me, Nate, and I don't know if I can live with that. You've sacrificed so much already. Nate reached out and took her hand, his voice steady but filled with determination. I'm not sacrificing anything, Olivia. I'm choosing us. I don't want to live a life where I'm constantly trying to meet other people's expectations. I want to build a future with you, not because I have to, but because I choose to. But Olivia's gaze faltered. And what about your family? What about everything you've worked for? I don't want to be the reason you lose everything. Nate's eyes softened. Olivia, you're not the reason I'm leaving. I'm leaving because I realized I've been living for everyone else. But now I want to live for me. For us. Olivia felt a tear slip down her cheek. But what if I'm not enough? What if you regret this decision? I don't want you to end up resenting me. You're enough, Olivia, Nate said softly, brushing the tear from her face. And I'll never resent you. I just want you to trust me. Trust that I'm making the right choice. Trust that we can build something real, something lasting. The days that followed were filled with a whirlwind of emotions. Nate had officially stepped away from the Blackwood legacy, and the press had already picked up on the story. The media was buzzing, speculating about his reasons for leaving. And the business world was watching closely to see what would happen next. But despite the chaos surrounding them, Nate and Olivia found solace in each other. They spent time away from the spotlight, focusing on their relationship and what it meant to be together. Olivia, too, was beginning to realize that the life they were building together didn't have to come at the cost of her own independence. She had been so focused on her career and her own success that she had neglected the possibility of true partnership. With Nate, she felt like she could have both love and her own identity. One night, as they sat together on the balcony of Nate's apartment, overlooking the city, Olivia turned to him, her voice filled with quiet conviction. You were right, she said softly. I've been so afraid of losing myself that I forgot what it meant to truly build a life with someone. I'm ready for this, Nate. I'm ready to fight for us, for our future. Nate smiled, pulling her into his arms. We'll face it all together, Olivia. No more running. No more fear. Just us, as they held each other, the city lights sparkling around them. They both knew that their journey wasn't going to be easy. But for the first time, they were both ready to face the future together. After Nate's bold decision to walk away from the Blackwood family business, life seemed to settle into a delicate rhythm for him and Olivia. They had moved into a modest apartment that felt like home, no longer overshadowed by the weight of corporate titles and family legacies. Their love, though still in its fragile early stages, felt like something real, something that could withstand the storms of life. But the world they had left behind wasn't ready to let them go so as the Blackwood family, specifically his father, hadn't taken Nate's departure lightly. The media buzzed with stories of the prodigal son's rebellion, and soon, Nate's absence from the corporate boardrooms began to create ripples throughout the business world. As Nate navigated his new reality, he faced mounting pressure from those who had once looked up to him, former colleagues, old family friends, and even employees who felt abandoned by his sudden exit. His father had begun to maneuver behind the scenes, using his connections to undermine Nate's attempts at forging a new path. One morning, as Nate sat at his new office, working on a project he was passionate about, he received a call from one of his former colleagues, David Carter, a close confidant from his days at Blackwood Enterprises. "Nate, we need to talk." David's voice was tense. "There's talk of a hostile takeover of Blackwood Enterprises. They're preparing to move forward with a merger that could change everything. If you don't step in, everything your family has built, everything you've built, could be lost." Nate leaned back in his chair, feeling the weight of the words. "I've walked away from all that. David, I can't go back to that life. Olivia wouldn't want you to let your family legacy fall apart," David pressed. "You've worked hard to build that empire. Don't let it crumble just because you're in love." Nate felt the familiar tug of responsibility, the legacy his family had built and the weight of its loss. But he also felt the tug of his heart toward Olivia, toward the life they had begun to build together. He wasn't sure where the road ahead would lead, but he knew he couldn't abandon everything, especially not for the business he had once considered his future. Olivia, too, was beginning to feel the pressure. Her life, which had once been defined by her independence and her career, was now intricately linked with Nate's decisions. As the tension between Nate and his family grew, Olivia couldn't help but feel like she was losing the man she loved to a world that didn't understand him. She had tried to be supportive, but the stress of their situation was beginning to show in their relationship. Nate was pulled in many directions, torn between his family's legacy and the love he had promised to her. And Olivia, as strong and independent as she was, found herself questioning if she could live in a world where the man she loved was constantly torn between two worlds. One evening, as they sat together, trying to make sense of the chaos around them, Olivia spoke her fears aloud. "I don't know if I can keep doing this." "Nate," she said softly, her voice trembling, "I love you, I do, but it feels like I'm losing you. You're still so connected to your family's world, and every time we take a step forward, something pulls us back. I don't want to be the reason you lose everything." Nate looked at her, guilt washing over him. "You're not the reason, Olivia. I'm the one who's torn. I want to be with you. I want us to build a future together. But I can't just ignore what's at stake." Olivia shook her head, her eyes welling up with tears. "But it's not just the company, Nate. It's you. You're changing, and I don't know how to help you anymore. I don't want to be with someone who is constantly divided between the man I love and the world he's been forced into." Despite their struggles, Nate knew he couldn't avoid his family forever. They had already begun making moves to bring him back into the fold, using every possible tactic to force him into a corner. His mother, ever the manipulator, arranged a meeting with Nate to discuss his future and hers. "Nate, darling," his mother began, her tone smooth but firm, "you've made your choices. But what about your future? What about Blackwood Enterprises?" "I've made my choice," Nate replied, his voice cold. "I'm not going back." His mother's expression softened, though it was clear she was hiding her frustration. "You're playing a dangerous game. Your father's health is deteriorating. Who will take care of the business when he's gone?" Nate stiffened at the mention of his father's health. His father's decline was inevitable, but it was something Nate had avoided facing for years. His entire life had been centered around living up to his father's expectations, and the thought of his father's passing sent a cold chill down his spine. "I'm not going back to the company. Mum, I'm not going to sacrifice everything for a legacy that's not mine to control anymore." His mother's eyes narrowed. You'll lose everything. And if you lose Blackwood Enterprises, you'll lose everything your father built. Everything we built. I'm not losing anything. I'm choosing my own future, Nate said, his voice growing more firm. But inside, he felt a sense of panic. The life he had walked away from was still looming, and Olivia was becoming more distant with every passing day. The thought of losing her, as well as the business, was almost too much to bear. As Nate faced his family, Olivia faced a decision of her own. She loved Nate, but she couldn't continue to live in a world where every moment was filled with tension. The constant pressure, the pull between Nate's family and their future, had created a gap between them that was growing wider with every day. One evening, Olivia sat alone in her apartment, watching the city lights flicker outside her window. The weight of their situation bore down on her, and for the first time, she allowed herself to think of her future outside of Nate. What if he couldn't let go of the Blackwood legacy? What if she was always going to be second to the expectations that had defined him? She took a deep breath and texted Nate, "Olivia, we need to talk. I'm not sure I can do this anymore." The days that followed Olivia's message were filled with a sense of dread and uncertainty. Nate knew that things were getting worse, not just between him and Olivia, but with the world he had tried so desperately to leave behind. His father's health was deteriorating, and the pressure to step back into the family business was becoming unbearable. Every call, every message from his mother or colleagues felt like a pullback into the life he had promised Olivia he would walk away from. Olivia's decision to pull back, her silence, was the last thing he wanted. He had already lost so much his connection with his family, the legacy that had been built for him. But he wasn't sure if he could survive losing Olivia too. She had been his anchor, the one thing that had made him feel like he was truly living. Without her, his world felt empty, as if everything he had fought for was slipping through his fingers. One evening, as Nate stood by the window of his apartment, staring at the city skyline, he realized that he had reached a breaking point. The battle between love and duty, between family and freedom, had become too much. He couldn't let this go on. He had to make a choice, once and for all. On the other side of the city, Olivia sat in the small apartment she had made her own, the silence pressing down on her. Nate had become a ghost in her life, and it wasn't just the distance between them that hurt, it was the uncertainty of what came next. She knew Nate was fighting for her, but was she asking too much? Was his love for her worth losing everything he had ever known? Her mind kept racing back to their conversations, how he had promised to choose her, how he had walked away from everything for love. But she couldn't shake the feeling that he was losing himself in the process, and she wasn't sure if she could keep carrying that weight. The last few days had been torturous. She had tried to reach out to him, but each time he seemed more distant, more lost. The pressure he was under was suffocating, and though she wanted to be the woman who supported him, she wasn't sure she could keep sacrificing her own happiness for the sake of their relationship. Olivia stared at the phone in her hand. She knew the time had come. They both needed to make a choice, and she could no longer wait. If she loved him, if she truly believed in their future together, then she needed to take the next step. But was she ready to take that leap? The next evening, after what felt like an eternity of indecision, Nate and Olivia found themselves at the same cafe where they had shared their first honest conversation. This time, there was no uncertainty in the air, just raw emotion. To people who had reached the end of their ropes, ready to either fight for love or let go, Nate arrived first, his hands shaking as he walked in. He spotted Olivia sitting by the window, looking out at the city, lost in thought. He walked over to her, his heart heavy with the weight of the decisions that had led them here. Olivia looked up, her eyes meeting his, and for a moment neither of them said anything. The silence between them was deafening. Finally, Olivia broke it. "Nate, I've been waiting for you to come back," she said softly, her voice trembling. "But I can't keep waiting forever. I can't be the reason you lose yourself. I love you more than anything, but I need to know that you're making this choice for yourself, not just for me." Nate sat down across from her, his voice low but firm. "I don't want to lose you, Olivia, but I can't keep living for everyone else. I can't keep pretending like I don't want a life with you. I'm done with the past, done with my family's expectations. I'm ready to fight for us. For you." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes as she reached for his hand. "I've been so scared, Nate. Scared that I'd lose myself in this. I've worked my whole life to build my own future, and I didn't want to give it up for someone else's. But I see now that I'm not giving it up, I'm building it with you. If we're going to do this, it has to be together. No more fear, no more doubts." Nate squeezed her hand, his eyes filled with love. "Then let's build it together. No more running, no more holding back. Just us. Whatever comes next, we face it together." As Nate and Olivia decided to take this step together, Nate's family was not done trying to pull him back. The day after their meeting, Nate's father called one last time, demanding to meet him. When Nate walked into the room, his father was sitting at the head of the long table in their family's private estate. The atmosphere was cold, tense, and filled with disappointment. "Do you really think you can just walk away from everything, Nate?" his father asked, his voice filled with contempt. "This company, this family, everything we've built is falling apart because of your foolish decisions. You're choosing a woman over your legacy, over your future. Is that what you really want?" Nate stood tall, his voice unwavering. "I've already made my decision, Dad. I'm not coming back to Blackwood Enterprises. I'm choosing Olivia. I'm choosing the life I want. And if that means leaving behind everything you've built, then so be it." His father's expression darkened. "You're making a mistake you'll regret." "I won't regret it," Nate replied firmly, his eyes filled with resolve. "I've already made my choice." For the first time in years, Nate felt free. He had stood up to his father, to the world that had controlled his every move. He was ready to take control of his own future, and that future, for the first time in his life, was his to decide. After his final confrontation with his family, Nate and Olivia began to truly build a life together. The weight of the past had been left behind, and now they were both free to create the future they wanted. Nate had sold off his shares in Blackwood Enterprises, completely severing ties with his family's empire, and they moved to a small home in a quieter part of the city, away from the noise of wealth and expectations. Olivia continued to build her career, but now with Nate by her side, supporting her every step of the way. She felt empowered, no longer burdened by the fears that had once held her back. Together, they built a new life, one that was free from the constraints of their pasts. One evening, after a long day of work, Nate surprised Olivia with a quiet dinner at home. He had planned it, oil candles, a meal they had cooked together, and soft music playing in the background. As they sat down, he took her hand, his eyes filled with love and sincerity. "Olivia," he began, his voice thick with emotion. We've been through so much to get here, to find this love, this life. And I know we're still going to face challenges, but I can't imagine facing them with anyone else. Olivia's heart raced as she looked at him, knowing what was coming. Nate, before she could finish, he pulled out a small velvet box and opened it to reveal a simple diamond ring. Olivia Turner, will you marry me? Will you be with me, always, through everything? Tears filled her eyes as she looked at him, overwhelmed with emotion. Yes, yes, of course I will, she whispered. And in that moment, surrounded by the life they had built together, Nate and Olivia knew that despite the trials and tribulations they had faced, their love was stronger than ever. They had chosen each other, and that was all that mattered.